is arcainex, and welcome to a brand new video. And in this video, I'm going to talk about the Lidless Wall. I want to stress that this is not a build video, but instead a video of me highlighting how much this unique created a fun, varied way of playing when pushing Nightmare Dungeons, with the core Bone Spear Necro build in mind. I want to start off by explaining how the Bone Spear build fundamentally works at its core, and how the unique's interaction with Bone Spear increases the fun factor for me. So first of all, Bone Spear is the most popular build for Necromancers because of its ability to deal the most amount of damage in the build currently, but it also combines amazing single target with great clear when paired with skills like Corpse Tendrils and the current Cage Hearts for the Season of the Malignant that are available to the Necromancer. If you want any more details on those hearts and which ones are the best to use on that class, please check out the video in the description. At a fundamental level, Bone Spear interact with passives like Serration, Avulsion, Ossified Essence, and multiple other aspects to help create this amazing damaging target skill. And I kind of want to explain this for anyone who might be new to Necromancers and new to the Bone Spear concept in general, before going into detail about how the Lidless Wall creates a nice varied way of playing this build. So the first passive that we use a lot with Bone Spear is Serration, and this gives you 0.9% increased critical strike chance for each 30 essence you have when you cast a bone build. The second passive we have is Avulsion, which gives you a 14% increased critical strike damage to vulnerable enemies. And the third major passive you find at the end of your Necromancer skill tree is Ossified Essence, where your bone skills deal 1% increased damage for each point of essence you have above 50 upon cast. Now these passives sort of combine with the Bone Spear aspect, the splintering one, that makes enemies who, after they've been hit beyond the first hit, become vulnerable for a certain amount of time, but then the bone shards from the Bone Spear, when it's reflecting back, deal either 30 to 60% bonus damage to vulnerable enemies, and it also pierces them. If we keep these passives in mind, we realize that the Bone Spear actually thrives on being able to do damage while at max essence to utilize the passives. Serration giving us more strike chance for each 30 essence we have when we cast. Ossified Essence giving us bone skills, giving our bone skills percentage damage increases based on the point of essence we have above 50 when we cast. So what happens is our gear and our build with Bone Spear thrives when we have pretty much maximum essence at all times. So because of this, when you're running a Bone Spear build, you end up running stats on your gear like critical strike chance and critical hit damage, because this is a crit build, but you pair that with like maximum essence, maximum life for defenses, vulnerable damage, because that's a must-have in the current meta, and that just ends up hitting really hard. But obviously the most important thing being we want as much essence as possible, even while casting. So what's really cool about Lidless Wall is it is a unique that is an offhand, so that switches up the playstyle from using a two-handed sword, which you would probably use before for the critical hit damage, and instead we paired the Lidless Wall with a wand for an extra lucky hit chance. I'll talk more about that later in the video. Now what does the Lidless Wall do? It's a lucky hit effect that when you have an active Bone Storm, hitting an enemy outside of that Bone Storm has up to a 5 to 25% chance to spawn an additional Bone Storm at their location. And each of your active sacrifice bonuses increase the chances by 25%, and the total number of additional Bone Storms you can have by +1. Now, why does this get exciting when we play Bone Spear? First of all, with most Bone Spear builds, you're actually not really pairing them with any minions. You end up sacrificing your minions for more bonuses to your character stats. So just because of that, we're increasing our chances of having our Bone Storms up extra 25% for each sacrifices, which is awesome. But we're also increasing the total number of Bone Storms we can have per because of those sacrifices, which is great. Bone Storm is also just a really good ultimate to have when running a Bone Spear build, especially because of the two specializations. The first one being the extra 20% critical strike chance, as well as the extra 15% damage reduction. Lidless lets us ride these two buffs non-stop with a constant chain of Bone Storms circling through the enemies. A forewarning though is that you will always lose damage when switching from a two-handed weapon to an offhand pair with a one-handed one. So what does the setup look like here? So we're pairing this with a wand because the implicit on the wand top is always going to be lucky hit chance, and we are trying to get as much lucky hit chance as possible to be able to keep the Lidless Wall Bone Storm effect going. And what I think is fascinating about the Lidless Wall is you have no idea how easy it is to proc this, guys. In the background of this gameplay, you'll see me keep procking as I move through packs. I'm running this at like really low lucky hit chance with nothing else on my gear but that one wand I have. I can't right now tell if this is a bug or just the chance of it spawning being increased because the sacrifice bonuses as well, but it makes it really easy to be able to run this build by just putting on the unique when you get it without changing your gear, because we really want those rank slots to still go into critical strike chance and critical strike damage and vulnerable damage and maximum essence. So we can't actually super afford to roll lucky hit chance on gear, so I'm really glad that we still have great uptime when pushing through the dungeons with this. Now, with the warning being stated that the two-handed weapon setup will always be better than using a one-handed and offhand, I think Lidless Wall, in my experience, helped me provide just a nice varied experience when I am constantly pushing through nightmare dungeons, which can be kind of a slog of a grind if you're moving towards an endgame goal like mine, which is to just kill Lilith. And so because of that, if I'm clearing events in dungeons, they just become so fun because there's so many bone storms that are swirling and the constant ticking numbers on your screen become hilarious. It actually becomes a mini game that you're playing with. How much can I keep the chain going from the first bone storm I procced early in the dungeon all the way till I literally don't have any ads to keep it up anymore? And with some of the dungeons in the Nightmare rotation this season, what's really fascinating is that you don't actually have to do a lot. The lucky chance hits proc, sometimes just hitting an enemy once, like you get really lucky, which is so fun. And the cool thing about it is you still have those two bonuses. This is a critical strike damage and chance build, essentially with Bone Spear. And because of that, we still have that permanent 25% uptime, and we're able to just push through enemies and have the damage reduction we need to tank a little bit as well, which is super helpful. I highly recommend this build for dungeon farming, but not as much for Helltides, because if you're not in the super dense areas of Helltide, then you end up losing your Bone Storm a lot more when transitioning from one mob pack to the other. I still ran it in Helltides because of how much I enjoyed it, but there's so much potential for chaotic events when you're watching a Bone Storm tick higher and higher when you're playing against. But it's also really fun to be able to use it versus bosses, because it gives you two Bone Storms, and while one ends up proccing way before the other, you're going to get less damage out because they're two-handed, but that's, totally fine if you're okay with enjoying just the Bone Storm like mini gameplay. There is a potential here to be able to tip the scales on what your primary damage source is and apply that aspect to your build. An example can be the aspect that changes your Bone Storm damage to shadow damage and then putting on the Shadow Blight passive at the end of the skill tree as well. But if you want to do all that, I just highly recommend and encourage you to check out Echo Hack's Omnistorm build instead, if that's what you're looking for, to make the Storm be your primary source of damage. If anyone else is picking Bone Spear and they want to add this on top, it really is just like an icing on the cake for a fun time, not so much in terms of optimizing the most damage you can get out of it. And that is Lidless Wall, guys, and the variant of that with Bone Spear. I highly recommend you guys check this out if you end up getting this unique to drop, because unique drop rates are somewhat abysmal for certain ones in Diablo 4 as of right now. I am on my way to defeating Lilith for the first time, and this was a fun build to use while I'm dredging through Nightmare Dungeon tiers. And if you try it out, I'd love to hear your thoughts as well. If you enjoyed the video and want to follow on my journey to destroying Lilith, please sub for more content. Till then, I remain arcainex, and thank you so much for watching. Have a great day.